Hello, everyone. This is Eric Pennington, and welcome to the Spirit of EQ podcast. We're glad that you've tuned in. A few things we wanted to tell you at the beginning of the show, and that's this podcast was created to be a tool to help you, primarily to discover and grow your EQ. Science and our own lived experiences confirm that the better we are at managing our emotions, the better we're going to be at making decisions, which leads to a better life. And that's something we all want. We're glad that you've taken out the time today to listen and hope that something that you hear will lead to a breakthrough. Hey, one last thing. We'd really appreciate a review on whichever platform you use to listen. And if you want to, leave some comments about what you heard today, as well as follow and subscribe. That way you won't miss a single episode as we continue this journey. And with that, the show begins. Welcome, everyone, to the show. It's glad to have you here. And today, in this episode, we're going to talk about happiness. And I'm going to frame this from the perspective of here in the United States, we typically call them the founding fathers. Well, there's this document called the Declaration of Independence. And for you scholars out there, if I'm missing anything, please don't be harsh, but feel free to correct me in the comments for the show. And it's this idea of the pursuit of happiness, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And it's interesting when you think about that sentence, the pursuit of happiness, it really has a lot of connotations that somehow life is this thing we're trying to find, we're trying to get a hold of happiness. I come from the camp that says that happiness is standing right in front of you. And there's really not much of a pursuit. Unless, again, if you're of the mind that it's elusive, that you got to find it, and it's maybe this great search. But I'm in the camp that believes it's right there. So is it a pursuit? Yeah, maybe in some ways. Yeah, I guess it can be. But in many ways, I think what happens with this subject matter is that it gets lost, that it really is about the choice. But we'll get into that a little bit here about that choice thing. But I want to outline for you where I think happiness can be so elusive for so many. And before I get into that, I just want to stress to you, and if you've listened to our show before, you know we're a big believer in getting help, right? So if you find yourself that, hey, Eric, what you're dispensing today, it sounds like it's easy, but it's not, and I have a difficult time, and quite frankly, I've been having a difficult time for a long period of time to find this thing you call, or we call, happiness. If you're in that spot, I don't want you to feel blue. I don't want you to feel down. There is help out there. And maybe it means you need to get more help than the person that lives next door to you or that you work with. There's hope here. And I believe in that. So I don't want you to misunderstand me as we're going through this episode that I'm just throwing out this flippant advice and you should be able to, by the end of the show, just boom, turn it like a light switch. Because I know for some it doesn't work that way. Just want to get that out there. So let's talk a little bit about circumstances, which I think can be the thing that gets people off of this idea or off of their game to be able to find happiness, right? And let me use the sort of analogy or the story around something here in the United States called the stock market. Quite frankly, the oil market more specifically, because right now at the recording of this episode, there is a war going on. Maybe there's a ceasefire at this point between the United States and Iran, throwing Israel into that mix as well. And it's having major impact on the oil market. And the oil market, as you may imagine or you may know, determines typically how much we're going to pay at the gas pump, right? So I woke up this morning to the BBC, and it appears that today, Monday, May, whatever we are on, I want to say it's maybe May 11th, there's volatility in the oil market because I guess the United States, our president, has decided that Iran's offer for peace was not acceptable. So, therefore, the oil market has sort of rallied toward prices going up in the oil market. Circumstances. So, it was very clear as you could hear this particular commentator on the BBC that there was a sense of doom, a sense of it's not good, that it's negative, right? But what's interesting to me, this has been going up and down for the last 2 or 3 months. You'll get the news flash. There's hope for peace. You'll get the news flash. Okay, we're going to have a ceasefire. Then there's not. Then there is. Then there's shipping and the Hormuz Strait. And, well, yes and no and up and down. And it really got me thinking. Are we that dependent on circumstances to determine what direction we're going to go? Short answer is probably. I think many people have made the mistake, and it's an understandable mistake, because quite frankly, I've done it myself. I'll talk a little bit about that later, where we we're kind of dependent on the circumstances, right? So think about it this way. Circumstances are temporary in nature. We know this, right? You know this, because tomorrow there might actually be a true peace deal between the United States and Iran, and the oil market will probably drop accordingly, which is understandable, right? Because no more war, free flowing oil, whatever the case may be. And then all things are good, right? But then the following day, maybe the United States or Iran changes their mind about some point in the peace plan. Market's going to go up, and up being negative for us as consumers because of the price. Circumstances really don't care about how I feel and how happy or unhappy I am. They're just doing what they do. And I'm using the oil market as one example. We could apply it to the stock market. We could apply it to your job. We could apply it to your personal relationships or professional relationships. They ebb and they flow, and they ebb and they flow. But the question is, how do we find happiness even though the circumstances are not in our favor? I would argue with you, and I've been on this planet long enough to tell you that I've got some really strong observational data. Circumstances have always been like this. There's always something. There's always something in our favor. That's always good. We like that. And there's always something in opposition to us. So I'm going to detail for you a story that if you've listened to our podcast before and you've followed us, you know probably some of the detail here. But I'm going to bring up to you or rehash maybe for some of you the story about my son and a really, really, it was a near fatal car accident. And that was in the fall of 2024. And I don't think we fully got out of the woods until probably May of last year. So it was a pretty extended period of time of uncertainty, good days, bad days, hopeful days, disappointing days, all of that. 35 surgeries. It was really difficult. My hope is that if you were to ask my wife and my close friends if I was unhappy during that period, they certainly would note for you that there were those times. But I would hope, because it would be true, I did find happiness even in those dark valley times. And it wasn't because happiness came knocking on my door with a nice bouquet. I had to choose it. And that's the big point here today. You have to choose it. So in those times with my son, I had to find happiness by choice. One of those was the example of where my son was hospitalized, at least initially after the accident. Um, it was in the northeastern part of Ohio, and we were in the midst of fall, right? You could remember that or tell that by the dates, being October of 2024. And I remember during those times when maybe he was recovering from one of those surgeries, or maybe there was just nothing was going on. He was just in his room. I would go out for a walk, and this particular hospital was surrounded by trees, a lot of trees. I don't know the variety, but as you can imagine, the colors were changing. We were moving in fall full fledged, and we were heading toward winter. And I remember going out for walks and specifically and intentionally looking at the color change and marveling and the wonder of the color change. I was searching really hard to find things to be happy about. But what was interesting for me was that I did find it. And I found it not because, again, circumstances came to me and said, here you go, here's something wonderful to make you happy, Eric. I had to choose it because they're colors that I had seen before. I've lived long enough to tell you what fall foliage looks like, right? But it was one of those things that I had to decide. I had to choose it. And sometimes in some of those days, in some of those walks, it was not easy because I felt like my world was falling apart, especially in the early part of this journey with this accident. But it really did bring to me the reality of I cannot wait for circumstances to line up for me to be happy. And that was a gift, even in the midst of a very difficult time. And in that choosing, it gave me a bit of a playbook, right? That I could use throughout all kinds of circumstances of life. Because it wasn't like my son's situation was the last difficult thing I was going to experience. Because I've experienced other difficulties. Business, this is a big one, right? Where a client said yes in the latter part of the year and then said, we can't do it when we move into the beginning of the year. Disappointment. But along the way, I had a playbook now. And it didn't just start with my son's accident. I mean, I think in many respects, I was building this throughout, right? Probably over the last 10 years. This playbook that says, you got to choose it, man, wherever you find yourself. And this can happen even in times when there's not really anything that bad going on, right? There's not really anything all that great going on, but I need happiness, so I got to choose it because it injects in me more gratitude. It gives me a sense that there's a reason to hope. It builds more hope, right? And this playbook, if I can, again, I describe it that way, it's a go-to thing. It's okay, you're in this place, be it good, bad, or in between, choose it. If you want it, you choose it. Because I think the danger, and I see this in people close to me personally and in my professional life, where it seems to be this I can't find it or I'm waiting for it, a la happiness. And the reality is that oftentimes it's just there waiting for you to choose it, just waiting for you to say, "Oh, I see it. This is great," be it small, medium, or large in magnitude. Colors in trees, smiles on the face of a child, great news from a client, whatever it may be, choosing it. But we're these creatures, right, where we got all these stories going through our head. And oftentimes those stories are typically negative. And that kind of makes sense, right? Because at the end of the day, um, our brain is trying to protect us. So it's the ultimate threat detector. And if something's not quite right, something's not going as planned, that can be perceived as a threat. So therefore, we got to get on hyper alert. We've got to beware. We've got to be concerned, if not afraid. And I understand this. That's how it works for my brain, right? I may not be that case for everyone, but at the end of the day, I have autonomy here. I can let my brain know to it's okay. You can chill. You can take a breath. We'll be okay. And I'm not so sure if people realize they have that kind of power and autonomy. And in many respects, it probably makes sense why they don't know this because of the culture we live in, the programming that goes on, if you will. And I'm of the mind that we've got to make these conscious choices. We've got to understand that it's not the pursuit of happiness as if it's something that might be difficult to find. See, I'm of the mind that, yeah, it is. It's actually very straightforward and simple to find. It may not be easy, but it's simple. It's straightforward. It's right there for you and me today. As I'm recording this, I have the choice that I can take to find happiness, be it small, be it medium, be it large, right? But that takes a lot. It is hard work. But here's the thing. Um, the hard work is rewarded. If it were easy, it probably would not be that valuable. Happiness would be sort of a blasé thing. So as I'm talking about this, I want to move a little bit more towards solutions since we've kind of teed this up, right? Um, there's this idea out there, maybe it is a concept that, emotional intelligence, is this pathway for making better decisions. And I believe that. But I also think it's a pathway to building a learnable skill. I think emotional intelligence is that. That's been my experience. It is a learnable skill. And part of that is helping me to understand, right, how I can go about exercising this playbook that I talked about. And some of it relates to a competency that we have in our sort of EQ model called consequential thinking. And the recognizing of patterns is another competency that comes to mind. And I think it really does flow into another one, as I'm thinking about it, and that's the intrinsic motivation piece. And there are competencies in our world, but let's face it, intrinsic motivation is not exclusive to emotional intelligence in our model, nor is consequential thinking, for that matter, and recognizing of patterns. I don't want to overstate our model, but it's found there and for good reason. So if I can call upon those competencies to move me to this place of where I can execute on this playbook, then it's a good thing. But like any skill, you have to learn it. You have to work on it to make it strong, to make it something of mastery, if you will, right? And I think when we do that, we position ourselves to be happier, right? And happier is not a state, right? As in, oh, once I find happiness, then I am happy. No, this is ongoing. Because, see, circumstances are always, at some point or another, going to be at odds with you or against you, right? Because, as I illustrated, today it could be awesome. There's peace, treaties signed, oil prices go down. But then 6 months later, treaty's been violated. We're going to war again, right? There's always going to be something. And I wish that there was this state of nirvana for happiness, but it doesn't exist. You have to be ongoing in this pursuit. And I'm kind of likening it back to the Declaration of Independence, I know, but I mean, in this case, the pursuit is appropriate and applicable. As in, you wake up every day, you got to choose it. You can't. You're not. There is no arrival point, right? But here's what's interesting, I think, happens when we do this. When we're building the skill of emotional intelligence, when we're leveraging these competencies, is we find that it's kind of our rhythm. We kind of get out of the business of waiting around for happiness to find us. We kind of stop thinking that there is this place called happiness. And I think that can be very powerful. I think it empowers us to live our best life, right? So I want to note another solution, and that's the thing you've probably heard from us before, and that's building new neural pathways. I think that is a must, and it comes along with the emotional intelligence skill. If we have an old neural pathway that got built, and sometimes these neural pathways get built and we're not even quite aware. It's very subconscious in nature because our brain, again, is probably trying to protect us, right? Trying to make this thing called life easy. So whether that neural pathway was subconscious or conscious, it got built, right? And if you are someone that maybe is in that camp, and I know I was, where I thought I could get to a place of happiness as a state, well, um, the same thing can be true in building a new neural pathway. And it is hard, once again, it's hard work, but it's worth it. So think about it this way. You got this old neural pathway that is consistently tied to, well, the stock market's down today, so man, I should be really concerned. Or, that person didn't return my call, so that means they don't like me, so this is not good, right? Or I just got the promotion, so now I'm very happy. Or I just closed another deal and it's a big one, and wow, I'm going to be able to go to President's Club, whatever the case may be. Again, if you've tied your happiness to circumstances, that's a neural pathway, right? That's how you think about it. That's your process. Well, if that's not working out for you, you can change that neural pathway. Or maybe better said, you can build a new neural pathway because the old neural pathway remains, it stays. It doesn't disappear just because you decide that you're going to do something different. I'm going to kind of liken that a bit to here in the city in which I live. There was this road. It wasn't a freeway. It was a kind of a highway. It was called 161, right? And I think it was called Route 161. And, years and years and years ago, decades ago, it was the way in which you went to travel from east to west in this area. It wasn't the only way, but it was in this geography, it was one of the ways you could travel east and west. And over time, with development and growth, they built an expressway, and it was called 161, kind of on the same pathway. They kind of operated parallel. But the old was Route 161, or East Dublin Granville Road, I think is another term for it, or that they had. But today, you'd be hard pressed to find anyone really traveling on that East Dublin Granville Road very much. I think you can if you really wanted to. I think it's still a road that can be traveled, but you'd probably wonder why would anyone go that way when there's the expressway that speed limits like 65 miles an hour. You can get to where you want to go much faster and more efficient. I use that comparison to the neural pathway because that's very much how it is with our brain and these neural pathways. When you build a new one, it takes time and there's construction, if you will. And the old one is very familiar, easy, quite frankly, until you build the new one. And the new one is much more of the path that you take. So in this case, it's maybe you're building a new neural pathway that says, no, it's not based on circumstances. Happiness is not. That's not how I'm going to proceed. That's not how I'm going to proceed down this path of life, right? So you begin the construction of a new neural pathway that says happiness is a choice. I have to choose it. every day. I got to look around and find it, right? And quite frankly, more than likely, it's really something real close to me. It's right in front of me, maybe. You do that for a second day. Third day, you have days where the construction doesn't go so well. You kind of revert back to circumstances, right? That old neural pathway. And this is a big one. I want to stress to you. It is a big one because there's this longing in us, right? For things to go well, to go our way, to feel good about living, right? But I can tell you, whether it takes you 2 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, whatever the case may be, it is worth the hard work to disconnect yourself from circumstances. Now, as you know, on this show, we don't tell you how to live. I haven't been given that authority, and you haven't granted me that authority. It's up to you to decide. I personally believe that if you tie your happiness to circumstances, you're always going to find a very up and down life, kind of like a yo-yo. I never liked that. And when I decided to work on building a new neural pathway, it was because I had gotten so frustrated with the circumstances being tied to my happiness. I needed a different way. I did not want more of my lifetime to be rooted around that. This circumstances driving how I perceived life and how I moved through life. So with that, I want to just stress to you the worth and the value of continuing to build a new neural pathway that's rooted around happiness being the choice. I am a major believer and advocate for that. There may be other approaches. I'm certain there are. This is not the exhaustive one and only, but I think there is great benefit in making happiness a choice and building a neural pathway that supports that. So with that, as we come to a close, we'd love to hear from you. If you've got comments, we certainly would welcome that. And we look forward to the next time that we're together. Take care. Hi, everyone. This is Eric Pennington with the Spirit of EQ. I'm not introducing a new episode today. I'm here to tell you some things that might help you. Jeff, you're with me as always. So yes. How do people get in touch with us?
Well, the best way is just send us an email at info@spiritofeq.com.
That's awesome. Jeff, I was also thinking about reviews, and I'm notoriously bad at asking for them. So reviews on all of the platforms, wherever you get your podcasts.
Yes.
Do you think that'd be good?
I think that would be great because, one, that will help us learn how to make better ones. And it's always good for us
so
to hear.
We're not the perfect podcast hosts?
We're close.
Okay, all right. But still,
not totally
we want
perfect.
your feedback. We want your feedback.
But it also might let us know a new subject. Hey, we need to dig deeper into that.
Yeah.
So let us know what you think.
Cool. We really appreciate that. As always, too, there is social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, and we also have a YouTube channel. Those also have mechanisms or options for you to be able to leave a comment, a like, or those kind of things. Just want to make sure that you know how to get in touch with us. Right, Jeff?
Right. We appreciate you all.
Thank you. Once again, we really appreciate you tuning in today. One of the things that Jeff and I want to bring to your attention as well is that when we created this podcast, it was not intended to take the place of a clinician. In other words, if you find yourself in a place where there's something deeper going on or something that you cannot solve on your own, we do recommend that you reach out to a clinician of some sort. This podcast is purely opinion-based, and it is rooted in the desire to help you along your path in whatever way we can. However, it is never going to replace, nor should it ever be looked at as a replacement for clinical help in any way. Thanks again for tuning in.